Today on Hearts of Heroes, an explosive fire rages through an historic apartment building, threatening the lives of everyone inside.
We knew this was a real deal.
Plus, a house fire erupts, trapping a man inside, unconscious and clinging to life.
When I arrived on the scene, the house was a ball of fire.
With smoke and fire raging, his chances for survival are slim.
I did not think he was going to live.
Thanks to teamwork and courage, these heroes are true lifesavers.
Many first responders utilize computers and modern technology to handle emergencies as quickly as possible. But what happens when those computers go down?
That's exactly what happened when a blaze erupted in a historic apartment building in Portland, Oregon. Luckily, heroes stepped up. Firefighters, emergency dispatch, and one brave maintenance worker.
The coastal city of Portland, Oregon is a diverse mix of past and present.
There's a tremendous amount of history to our city. Portland is a mosaic of older buildings along with modern construction. We have a lot of these historic structures that are within our response areas.
One of the historic structures is the May apartment building.
It's a 4-story, unreinforced masonry building that was constructed about 115 years ago.
We have tile from the 40s and 20s in it. We have vintage refrigerators. We have clawfoot tubs, along with a vintage telephone in every single unit.
But this landmark almost disappeared from the skyline shortly after it was built.
Tragically, in 1921, a first responder lost his life trying to save this majestic structure from a devastating fire.
You fast forward 102 years later, and we're right back in this building with what turned out to be a much larger fire problem.
In May of 2023, this building was ground zero for one of the worst fires in Portland's history.
This is a building that has had some frequent false alarms with the fire system, people artificially pulling the pull stations.
Since the last, I think, 6 or 7 months, we've had 24 false alarms in that building. So you can understand why the occupants think that number 25 is not a significant fire.
One person who did take the alarm seriously was the building's maintenance worker, Hector Velasquez.
I was working on the first floor in one of the apartments. A person came to me and said that there was a fire upstairs. So the first thing I did is I went to make sure everyone got out of the building. And I was starting to knock on doors because the people didn't know there was a fire.
Hector saw smoke coming out of one of the apartments, and he immediately went upstairs to the top floor to let the residents up there know that we had a fire in the building and that they needed to evacuate immediately. It wasn't about him. Sorry. It's about the residents. It's about the people that lived here. He cared more about them than himself, and he wanted to make sure they all got out safely.
911, is there an emergency?
Meanwhile, 911 calls went out to emergency dispatchers. But there was a problem, a big problem.
We had scheduled maintenance for our computer system that day.
This sophisticated system transmits vital information directly to first responder vehicles. This includes the exact location of an emergency, the building's blueprints, fire vehicles' whereabouts, water line and hydrant locations, as well as traffic reports.
We did not have the capability to send information to our responders in the field through the computer system.
Which meant that we had no maps of the building en route. We did not have maps to show us where the hydrants were at, so we effectively were flying blind.
So that day, I voiced the original fire call that came out, gave them the address and the details that were given by the caller. Normally, on a normal operation day, would have come via the computer system.
Now, as Hector was going floor to floor helping people evacuate their apartments, dispatchers manually directed first responders to the fire.
We were conducting a fire inspection really close to where the fire took place, and so we were roughly 45 seconds to being on scene.
You could see, obviously, it was serious from the outside. Right when we arrived, we knew this was a real deal, and we knew that we were going to have to go in and do something quickly.
Firefighters jumped into rescue mode.
We had people on the fire escape trying to get out of the building, and there's no ladder at the bottom of it for people to get down. We have to throw a ladder to it to get people off. So that took precedence over everything else.
Meanwhile, Jared Borland went in the building to help evacuate people from their apartments.
We were telling people they need to get out. By the time we got to the 3rd floor, there was a lot heavier smoke. We were just telling everybody they needed to get out. It was time to go.
These first firefighters on the scene quickly realized there was just no way that they could fight this fire by themselves. Coming up.
Firefighters on the street were getting hit as the building is essentially blowing up.
Plus, when a man's home becomes an inferno, a single call may save his life.
I said, I'm trapped upstairs, and that's the last thing I remember.
But first, some advice should you find yourself in a building next to a fire.
Large structure fires are inherently dangerous, with flames often spreading to multiple floors in just seconds.
These fires, like any other, also pose the threat of spreading to neighboring structures. Should you find yourself in a building next door to a raging fire, carefully and methodically exit your structure and maintain a safe distance until the blaze has been extinguished.
Fires spread quickly, so always be sure to be mindful and listen to the first responders. Remember, when it comes to staying safe, awareness matters.
In May of 2023, a massive fire broke out in an historic apartment building in Portland, Oregon.
I've been in the job for almost 17 years. This was the most monumental fire I've ever been on in my career.
With the first crew on scene in rescue mode, backups thankfully showed up soon after.
We had fire that, on arrival, was blowing out the window and extending to the 4th floor.
The construction style of those buildings does lend to rapid fire progression.
So once the fire gets in the wall, it's going to go up and it's going to spread out.
Just minutes later, the blaze was raging and truly out of control. Firefighters called a 4th alarm.
By the time I got to the 4th floor, there were several companies working on getting the fire knocked down. So I jumped in to start doing the search, but the visibility on the 4th floor was completely, there was nothing.
At a certain point, the fire was growing so rapidly and conditions were deteriorating inside for those crews so quickly that we had to leave the building because maybe you put your own people in a position where now they are in some serious trouble.
But some were just not ready to surrender and asked for more time.
We did have a company on the 2nd floor say, we can't come out yet, we're still pulling people out.
Reluctant to risk the lives of these heroic firefighters, Chief Miller denied their request, immediately ordering all remaining first responders to exit the structure.
Maybe a minute after we got all of our folks and the residents out of the building, we had what looked like a smoke explosion on the 4th floor. Firefighters on the street were getting hit with debris as the building is essentially blowing up.
Now the fire was threatening the buildings next door.
We had a structure that was 2 feet to the south, a residence apartment complex. So we do what's called exposure protection. We take large hoses and we run them between the structures to maintain a cooling feature, a water curtain, and we saved that building.
After 24 grueling hours, the fire was finally out.
We were there fighting fire for over a day. We didn't have crews leave until noon the next day.
It's one of those fires that tests you to the limit. Everyone was tired when that was done. I've never been more tired than I was after that fire.
Luckily, everyone made it out alive, but the building suffered extensive damage. Within hours, our sponsor, Belfour Property Restoration, was on scene to assess that damage and hopefully return the apartment to its past glory.
There's more than just the damage to the top floors. There's smoke, there's water throughout. So even if we are able to repair those 3rd and 4th floors, the entire building will need to be rehabbed.
There's 2 options here that we're assessing. One is going to be to remove the 4th floor down to the 3rd floor ceiling. The other option is to look at completely taking the building down to the ground at this point.
With buildings like this that have been in the Portland area for over 100 years, there's a history here. When something like this comes down, it affects an entire community.
As the community waits to find out the fate of the May apartments, everyone can take pride in the many heroes who stepped up that day. From those 911 operators who rose to the occasion when their computers were down, to the brave firefighters.
Our logo says always ready, always there, and that's essentially what we did that day.
It's incredible, the type of individual that is drawn to this job. We serve our community, we do everything we possibly can, we commit a lot, we risk a lot in the opportunity to save a lot.
And of course, one selfless maintenance man who refused to leave anyone behind.
He really performed a lot of miraculous, courageous effort prior to our arrival, setting the stage for us to be as successful as we are.
The most important thing for me was the people. That's all that mattered.
Coming up, a house fire erupts, trapping a man inside, unconscious and clinging to life.
I'm trapped upstairs, and that's the last thing I remember.
With smoke and fire raging, his chances for survival are slim.
I did not think he was going to live.
A fast-growing house fire can engulf a structure in a matter of minutes, endangering anyone inside. So it's imperative that rescue teams arrive as quickly as possible.
With the lives of both the people trapped inside and the firefighters on the line, every minute counts, and those moments can mean the difference between life or death.
Sandwiched between Flint and Lansing, Michigan, along the shores of the Shiawassee River, sits the city of Owasso.
It's a small community, bed and breakfast type community, and it's in the heart of Shiawassee County.
Life in this small community is simple and quiet. That's how the morning of February 18th, 2022 began for Arthur Snyder.
The day started out pretty normal, really. I woke up, went downstairs and cleaned up, and then I went upstairs to read the Bible. I knew something might be wrong when I saw smoke coming up past the window outside. I thought maybe there was a fire in the garbage can out below the window, so I was going to make an attempt to go put it out. When I opened the bedroom door, I noticed there was a lot of smoke inside the house. So I closed the door to keep the smoke out, and there was a wash rag that I had folded up, and I sprayed it with some water and put it over my face so that I wouldn't inhale as much smoke.
Arthur did the right thing. He moistened the towel, stayed low, and kept calm.
I thought that maybe I could get down the stairs if I laid on my belly to stay away from the smoke. And I poked my head out the door, and I noticed that there were flames coming up the stairs. And I knew that idea of trying to crawl down the stairs on my belly was no good. So as soon as I closed the door, I picked up my phone and called 911.
But neighbors had already called for help.
When I called 911, the operator asked me if I was calling about the fire, and all I said was that I'm trapped upstairs, and that's the last thing I remember.
When I arrived on the scene, literally the house was a ball of fire.
One of the police officers had notified us that they believed the victim would be in the front bedroom.
We got to get him out, so the only way we're going to get him out is to go in.
But this fire was too intense for firefighters to get inside.
I made the determination with the captain that we were going to have to knock the fire down, at least to gain some control, to reassess and decide how we were going to be able to make entry to perform that rescue.
When you see this amount of fire, people inside have a low probability of living. Just due to the heat, the smoke, the human body just cannot handle that type of heat going into your lungs.
Sir, are you there?
Coming up, firefighters risk their own lives to save Arthur. But will they get to him in time?
He was completely limp, unconscious. To me, that was a person that was deceased.
But first, a tip that could someday save your life.
Being caught in a house fire would be a terrifying experience. That's why it's so important to have an exit plan before a disaster strikes.
Start by mapping out the multiple exits in your home and practice exiting them safely. These drills can help you keep your bearings, even if you lose visibility during a fire.
Taking the extra time to prepare may keep you calm and collected in the face of an emergency.
With his house engulfed in flames, Arthur Snyder was unconscious on his bedroom floor. With precious minutes left, firefighters had to find some way to get inside that inferno.
It was imperative that we got inside.
But before they could even attempt a rescue, they'd have to get control of the fire on the first floor.
There was a couple hot spots in the front room, so we knocked that down. And there's not a lot of visibility.
We decided to do an interior search. Myself and firefighter McKay made entry. We had been given some guidance onto where the interior stairs were, but not much other than that.
The first 5-6 minutes is real crucial if we're going to make a rescue compared to recovery. At that point, when I got to the stairs, I wasn't too sure of which one we would be doing, rescue or recovery.
Desperate to reach Arthur, rescuers outside made their way to the second story.
We knew that by putting a ladder up to that main window, we can try and get to where that victim is, as well as also sending fire personnel through the house.
Not knowing where the victim may be, we had to search every bedroom up there.
The lieutenant had the thermal imaging camera, so he went past me to the next room on the left.
Thermal imaging is a process that allows first responders to detect body heat signatures.
I felt a relief in the wall. And that's when I said, hold on a second, this may be the bedroom door. I was able to open the door and immediately heard the victim gasping for air.
We couldn't see anything. We could hear him breathing, and it didn't sound good. It's what we would call agonal respirations.
Agonal breathing is the breathing that occurs just prior to when someone's going to stop breathing and go into cardiac arrest. I knew that our time was limited, so now it was time to get him out of the house. I made the decision with firefighter McKay that it would be best to remove him out the window, not only for speed, but to not further expose him to more smoke or heat.
Well, Lieutenant Nowicki and I carried him over to the window. We said, hey, we got one. I was leaning through the window, and I grabbed him under the arms and through around the shoulders. He was completely limp, completely unconscious. To me, that was a person that was deceased. I did not figure that they had survived.
Unclear if Arthur was alive, firefighters dragged him out of the window, but his body was so limp, it slid between the rungs of the ladder.
He accidentally got put through the rung of the ladder, and the rope of the ladder that extends it actually held him in the air.
So I was yelling down to some other firefighters. I had them grab ladders and ladder each side of my ladder and assist me in holding this victim.
So we had to holler for people to get underneath the ladder so we could slowly lower him so we would not drop him.
Once he was down on the ground, there was a medical crew down below.
When I saw him, I did not think he was going to live. People don't survive fires like this. It's very rare.
The next thing I remember is regaining consciousness. Just knowing that I was in the hospital and that I was awake was such a relief, you know, and I knew that everything would be okay.
Arthur is eternally thankful to these men and women who risked their lives to save his on that day. He also got the opportunity to show his appreciation firsthand.
Sure is good to see you guys.
Good to see you, Arthur.
Thank you so much. I'm just so thankful for what they did and being able to rescue me and get me out of that harrowing situation.
You guys worked hard that day to get to you, and it's a blessing to see you standing here today and looking so good, because that day I wouldn't have thought that when we were pulling you down the ladder.
I want to thank you all again from the bottom of my heart. You know, God bless you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll always be thankful. You know,
that's what we're here for.
God bless you all. God bless you.
In 33 years of fire service, I've never seen a rescue like this. It's so rare to actually find a victim that's alive in a fire like this and actually hand them down a ladder.
That's what's amazing to me, is that we did it here in Little Owasso.
There are so many kinds of heroes, from brave firefighters to dedicated police officers.
Or sometimes they're just a caring person who jumps in to help when they are needed the most. And today, we applaud all of these wonderful, considerate men and women. Thank you so much for watching, too. We'll see you next time on Hearts of Heroes.